Pregnant mother bear begs for water. What this baby does. Next is Unthinkable. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The sun beat down mercilessly on the small forest village of Pinewood, where drought had gripped the land for weeks. Streams had shrunk to trickles, and the once lush forest surrounding the village had grown eerily quiet as wildlife retreated deeper into the woods in search of water. The afternoon heat shimmered above the dusty ground as Olivia Morgan wiped sweat from her brow, glancing toward her 15-month-old son, Noah, who played contentedly on a blanket spread across the porch floor. "I'll just be inside for a moment, sweetheart," Olivia called to her husband Daniel, who was repairing a fence post nearby. "Keep an eye on Noah, will you?" Daniel nodded without looking up, focused on his work. Of course he's not going anywhere. Little did they know that their peaceful afternoon was about to transform into something extraordinary, a moment that would become legend in their village for generations to come. Noah sat on his blanket, stacking wooden blocks that tumbled over repeatedly, causing him to giggle with delight. His chubby fingers worked determinedly to rebuild his tower, completely absorbed in his simple game. The wooden water barrel at the edge of the porch stood nearly full, the family's carefully rationed supply for the coming days. A rustling from the tree line caught Noah's attention. His wide blue eyes lifted from his blocks, curious about the sound. From between the drought-stricken trees emerged a large, lumbering figure, a brown bear with a swollen belly, her movements slow and labored. Her coat looked dull, her tongue hanging from her mouth as she panted heavily in the unforgiving heat. Daniel had moved around to the back of the house, just out of sight, leaving Noah momentarily unattended on the porch. The bear stumbled forward, drawn by the scent of water. She was not a threat, she was desperate. Her eyes, usually fierce and alert, were glazed with exhaustion. The enormous creature collapsed near the steps of the porch, her pregnant belly heaving with each labored breath. Just feet away from the water barrel she could smell but couldn't reach. Noah watched the bear with innocent fascination. Where adults would have seen danger, he saw only another living being, one that seemed to be suffering. The bear raised her head weakly, looking directly at Noah. Their eyes met, a moment of connection between the most unlikely of creatures. She let out a low, mournful sound. Not a growl of aggression, but a plea. The baby's face scrunched up in concentration. He had been watching his parents fill cups from the barrel for days. With determined movements, he pushed himself up to standing, holding onto the edge of the porch for balance. The bear watched through half-closed eyes as Noah toddled unsteadily to a small wooden bowl his mother had left nearby. With both hands, Noah grasped the bowl, then made his way to the water barrel. Standing on tiptoes, he managed to dip the bowl into the water, spilling most of it as he turned. Undeterred, he carefully made his way toward the bear, tiny drops of precious water marking his path across the wooden planks. When he reached the edge of the porch, Noah tipped the bowl, creating a small puddle that dripped down to where the bear lay. The animal's eyes widened slightly at the sight of water so close. With tremendous effort, she stretched her neck, extending her tongue to lap at the precious moisture. Noah beamed with satisfaction, then turned to repeat his journey. Trip after trip, he carried small amounts of water to the edge of the porch, creating a growing puddle within the bear's reach. The bear drank gratefully, her breathing gradually becoming less labored. In the distance, a shout broke the silence. "Bear! There's a bear at the Morgan place!" A neighbor had spotted the massive creature from the road and was now running toward the nearest houses, raising the alarm. Daniel emerged from behind the house, his face draining of color as he saw his son standing just feet away from the enormous predator. "Noah!" he gasped, frozen in horror. Olivia appeared in the doorway, her scream caught in her throat as she took in the impossible scene before her. Villagers began to appear, drawn by the commotion. Someone had brought a rifle. "Get back!" he shouted, raising the weapon toward the bear. "The child is in danger." But before anyone could act, they all stopped, witnessing something that defied everything they thought they knew about wild animals. The bear, having gathered a little strength, gently pushed her snout against Noah's small hand in a gesture that could only be described as gratitude. Noah giggled, patting the bear's nose as if she were no more threatening than the family dog. "Wait," whispered Olivia, her voice trembling. "Look at what's happening. She's not hurting him." The bear's eyes moved from the child to the adults, filled not with aggression, but with a dignified awareness. She seemed to understand the precarious nature of this moment, that her life and the lives of her unborn cubs hung in the balance of human mercy. "That bear," said Eleanor, the oldest woman in the village, stepping forward with eyes wide in wonder. She came to beg, not to bite, and only the child understood. The villagers watched in awe as Noah continued his mission, fetching more water for the exhausted animal. The rifle was lowered, and a profound silence fell over the gathering as they witnessed compassion in its purest form, coming from the youngest among them. After drinking her fill, the mother bear struggled to her feet. She stood for a moment massive and majestic despite her weakened state, and looked directly at Noah's parents. Her gaze seemed to carry a message, one of gratitude, of respect, of connection between species that went beyond words. Then, with a gentle huff of breath, she turned and made her way back toward the forest, her movements already stronger than when she had arrived. As the bear disappeared into the trees, the spell seemed to break. Olivia rushed forward, scooping Noah into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "How did you know?" she whispered into his hair. "How did you know what to do when we were all too afraid?" Noah just smiled, pointing toward the forest where the bear had vanished. He was too young to explain that he had simply seen a thirsty creature and known how to help. That compassion needed no words, no justification, no complex reasoning. In the days that followed, the story spread throughout the region. People spoke in hushed tones about the baby who had shown more wisdom than all the adults combined. Within a week, the villagers had begun constructing a small stone fountain at the edge of the forest, a permanent water source for wild creatures during times of drought. Families started leaving water out in shallow basins during the dry season, a new tradition born from one child's instinctive kindness. The relationship between the village and the forest began to change, fear giving way to respect and coexistence. And Noah? He grew up hearing the story told and retold, though he had no memory of that extraordinary day. But something of that connection remained with him, a special affinity for the natural world and its creatures that would shape his life in ways no one could have predicted. In the years that followed, villagers would occasionally spot a mother bear with cubs near the forest fountain. They could never be certain it was the same bear, but they liked to believe it was, that she had returned to show her children the place where an act of unthinkable kindness had saved their lives before they were even born. The legend of the baby and the bear became part of the village's identity, a reminder that sometimes the youngest among us can teach the most profound lessons about compassion, courage, and the bonds that connect all living things. 5 years later, the drought that had once gripped Pinewood seemed like a distant memory now. The forest had recovered its lush greenery, and the streams flowed abundantly once more. Noah, now 6 years old with unruly brown hair and the same piercing blue eyes, skipped alongside his mother on the village path that led toward the forest fountain. "Tell me again, Mama," Noah pleaded, his small hand wrapped in Olivia's. "Tell me about the bear." Olivia smiled down at her son, her heart swelling with pride. "You've heard it 100 times, sweetheart. But I want to hear it again," he insisted. "Tell me how I wasn't afraid." She squeezed his hand gently. "You were too young to understand fear. That was your gift, Noah. Where everyone else saw danger, you saw only a creature in need." They approached the stone fountain that stood at the forest's edge. Over the years, it had been expanded and embellished, now featuring a carved bear with cubs at its center. Villagers had added stone benches around it, making it a place of gathering and reflection. As was their custom on the anniversary of that fateful day, Olivia and Noah had come to leave fresh wildflowers at the fountain's edge. Noah carefully arranged his bouquet, his face serious with concentration. "Do you think she remembers me?" he asked softly. Before Olivia could answer, a deep voice behind them responded. "If she's still out there, I'm certain she does." They turned to find Thomas Reed, the village's most experienced tracker and hunter, standing a few paces away. Once the man who had raised his rifle that day, Thomas had been profoundly changed by what he witnessed. He had put away his hunting weapons and dedicated himself to wildlife conservation, becoming the forest's fiercest protector. "I've been meaning to tell you both," Thomas said, his voice lowered as if sharing a secret. "I've seen tracks. Large bear tracks, with smaller ones alongside them. A mother and cubs near the eastern creek." Noah's eyes widened. "Is it her? The bear I helped?" Thomas knelt to meet Noah's gaze. "I can't say for certain, but there's something peculiar about these bears. They don't shy away from the village like the others do. They seem to watch over it somehow." Olivia felt a chill run up her spine, not of fear, but of wonder. "What do you mean, Thomas?" The tracker stood, looking toward the dense line of trees. 3 weeks ago, little Sophia Winters wandered too far into the forest gathering berries. Her parents were frantic. We searched for hours." He paused, his weathered face softening. "We found her asleep under an oak tree, completely unharmed, and all around her, large paw prints in the soft earth, as if something had been guarding her until we arrived." Noah gasped, clutching his mother's hand tighter. "The bear was protecting her." "Perhaps," Thomas said carefully, "or perhaps it's just an old man's imagination. But I do know this. Since that day you shared your water, Noah, not a single person from our village has been harmed by the forest creatures, even as other villages report encounters." As they spoke, Eleanor approached, now using a wooden cane but her eyes as bright as ever. At 92, she remained the village's most revered elder, her wisdom sought by all. "Talking about the bears again, are we?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Thomas thinks they're watching over us," Noah explained excitedly. Eleanor nodded solemnly. "There are bonds formed that go beyond our understanding. What you did that day, child, it wasn't just water you offered, it was recognition. You saw her not as a beast, but as a mother, fighting for her babies' lives. Such recognition is rare, even among grown folk." A comfortable silence fell over the small group as they contemplated her words. Then, from the tree line, came a soft rustling sound. Noah was the first to turn, his keen eyes searching the shadows between the trees. For just a moment, so brief they would later question if they had imagined it, they glimpsed a large brown form and 2 smaller shapes beside it, watching from the forest's edge. Then they were gone, melting back into the trees like ghosts. "Did you see?" Noah began, but Eleanor gently touched his shoulder. Some things are better left as mysteries, child, she said softly. But know this. Kindness echoes in ways we cannot always trace. As they walked back toward the village, Noah couldn't stop thinking about the shapes he'd seen in the forest. That night, as his mother tucked him into bed, he made a decision. "I'm going to be an animal doctor when I grow up," he announced firmly. Olivia smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Is that so?" "Yes." Noah nodded seriously. "I want to help them all, not just bears." "That sounds like a wonderful plan," she said, kissing his forehead. "Now sleep, my little healer." But sleep wouldn't come easily for Noah that night. As the moon rose high over Pinewood, casting silver light through his bedroom window, he heard a sound that made him sit upright in bed, a low, rumbling noise that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the house. Slipping from beneath his covers, Noah padded to the window and peered out. There, at the edge of their yard where the forest began, stood a massive shape silhouetted in the moonlight. The bear raised her head, seeming to look directly at Noah's window, before disappearing back into the darkness. Noah didn't tell anyone about his midnight visitor. Some secrets he understood instinctively were meant to be kept, but from that night forward, he felt a connection to the forest and its creatures that went beyond ordinary understanding, a bond formed in a moment of innocent compassion that would guide the course of his life. 10 years later, the summer heat pressed down on Pinewood Village, reminiscent of that long-ago drought, though not nearly as severe. 16-year-old Noah Morgan wiped sweat from his brow as he carefully examined the injured fox cub on the table before him. His makeshift veterinary clinic, once the family's storage shed, now converted with his father's help, had become a sanctuary for wounded wildlife from miles around. "The leg isn't broken," Noah explained to 10-year-old Lily, who had brought the fox to him after finding it trapped in an old snare. "But the cut is deep. He'll need to stay here for a while." Lily nodded solemnly, her freckled face serious. Like most of the village children, she had grown up hearing the story of Noah and the bear. To them, Noah was something of a local legend, the boy who could speak to animals, who understood them in ways others couldn't. "Will you tell me the bear story while you work?" Lily asked hopefully. Noah smiled as he carefully cleaned the fox's wound. "Shouldn't you be helping your mother with the harvest?" "Please?" Lily persisted. "I want to hear it from you, not from the grown-ups." Sighing with good-natured resignation, Noah began to tell the tale he had heard countless times, though his own memory of the event remained elusive, more feeling than concrete recollection. As he spoke, working gently on the injured animal, neither of them noticed the tall figure that had appeared in the doorway. "You've left out the most important part," said a deep voice. Noah looked up, surprised to see Dr. James Bennett standing there. The regional wildlife biologist had become Noah's mentor over the past few years, recognizing the teenager's extraordinary gift with animals and guiding his studies. "What part is that?" Noah asked, finishing the bandage on the fox's leg. Dr. Bennett stepped into the small clinic, his normally serious face softened by a rare smile. That the boy grew up to be exactly what he promised, a healer of animals, and that his reputation has spread far beyond this little village. Noah felt his cheeks grow warm. "I'm just helping where I can, which is precisely why I'm here." Dr. Bennett placed a thick envelope on the table. "The university has reviewed your application, Noah, along with my recommendation and the documentation of your work here." Noah stared at the envelope, his heart suddenly pounding. For years, he had dreamed of attending the prestigious veterinary program at Westfield University, a dream that had seemed impossible for a village boy with limited resources. They've not only accepted you, Dr. Bennett continued, they've offered you a full scholarship, the first ever wildlife rehabilitation scholarship. You'll begin this fall. Lily gasped, clapping her hands together. Noah's going to be a real animal doctor. The news spread through Pinewood like wildfire. By evening, it seemed the entire village had gathered at the Morgan home to celebrate. Noah felt overwhelmed by the attention, slipping away as the festivities continued to find a moment of quiet at the forest fountain. As he sat on one of the stone benches, reflecting on how his life was about to change, he heard the distinctive sound of a cane tapping on the path. Eleanor, now nearly 100 years old and frail but still sharp-minded, made her way slowly toward him. "I knew I'd find you here," she said, easing herself onto the bench beside him. "Everyone's so excited," Noah said. "I'm excited too, but also afraid?" Eleanor suggested gently. Noah nodded. "I've never been away from Pinewood, from the forest." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, her weathered hands folded over her cane. "Did I ever tell you about the dreams I've had? For years now, ever since that day?" Noah looked at her curiously. "What dreams?" "I see her sometimes, the mother bear. In my dreams, she's standing at a crossroads in a great forest, and she's waiting for something." Eleanor's eyes were distant, seeing beyond the present moment. "I think she's waiting for you, Noah, not here, but out there in the wider world." "What does that mean?" Noah asked, confused. Eleanor patted his hand. "It means your connection to these creatures. It was never meant to stay confined to our little village. There are animals that need you beyond our forest. The bear knew it then, and she knows it now." As if in response to her words, a low, melodic call echoed from the deep forest, the sound of a bear, though unlike any bear call Noah had heard before. It sent shivers down his spine. "You see?" Eleanor smiled. "She's giving you her blessing to go." When Noah returned to the celebration, he carried a new sense of purpose. His path forward was still daunting, but somehow clearer. What had begun with a simple act of compassion had shaped not just his life, but the lives of all those around him. 20 years later, Dr. Noah Morgan stood at the podium, looking out over the audience gathered for the grand opening of the Pinewood Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. The modern facility, built on the edge of his childhood village, represented the culmination of years of work, research, and advocacy. "We stand today at the intersection of two worlds," Noah began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "The human world of science and progress, and the wild world of instinct and survival. For too long, we've seen these worlds as separate, even opposing forces. This center represents a different vision, one where these worlds not only coexist, but support each other." From his position on the stage, Noah could see the familiar faces of his village, his parents, now gray-haired but beaming with pride. Thomas Reed, stooped with age but still forest-strong. Young families with children who had grown up hearing his story. He also saw his colleagues from the university, government officials and environmental advocates who had helped make this day possible. As many of you know, my journey began with an encounter between a desperate mother bear and a toddler too young to know better, Noah continued, smiling as laughter rippled through the local crowd. "What I didn't understand then, what I've spent my life coming to understand, is that the boundaries we perceive between species are far more permeable than we imagine." As he spoke, a commotion at the back of the gathering caught his attention. People were turning, murmuring in surprise, creating a path for someone moving toward the front. Noah squinted against the sun, trying to make out who was approaching. It was Elena Vasquez, the center's head veterinary technician, cradling something in her arms. Her face was alight with excitement and disbelief. "Dr. Morgan," she called, her voice breaking protocol but clearly too urgent to wait. "You need to see this. They found her just outside the perimeter fence." Elena reached the stage and carefully handed Noah a small bundle wrapped in a soft green blanket. Pulling back the edge, Noah found himself looking into the eyes of a bear cub, tiny, vulnerable, and unusual in a way that made his breath catch. The cub had a distinctive white diamond-shaped patch on its chest, a marking identical to one Noah had seen in old photographs taken of the mother bear from his childhood, preserved in the village records. "Genetic testing will confirm it," Elena whispered. "But based on the markings and the location, we think she may be a descendant of your bear." A hush fell over the crowd as Noah cradled the cub, who seemed remarkably calm in his arms. "Where was she found?" he asked quietly. "Alone, just beyond the southern fence, no sign of the mother." Elena hesitated. "There were hunting traps discovered in that area last week. We fear the mother may have been killed by poachers." Noah felt a painful tightening in his chest. Despite all the progress they had made, despite the protections now in place around Pinewood Forest, the wider struggle to safeguard wildlife continued. Looking down at the orphaned cub, Noah made a silent promise. Not just to this small creature, but to its ancestor who had changed the course of his life. The circle that had begun with a desperate mother bear and a compassionate child was continuing, connecting past to present in ways no one could have foreseen. "Change of plans," Noah announced to the crowd, his voice firm with resolution. "This rehabilitation center was meant to open next week for operations, but it appears our first patient couldn't wait." Cheers erupted from the audience. As if understanding she was the center of attention, the bear cub stirred in Noah's arms, letting out a small huffing sound that made everyone laugh. Later that evening, after the celebrations had ended and the center stood quiet under the stars, Noah sat alone in the nursery unit, bottle-feeding the orphaned cub. Through the large windows he could see the forest stretching dark and mysterious beyond the facility's boundaries. Somewhere in those depths were the descendants of the bear he had helped as a child, living proof that one act of kindness could ripple across generations. The cub, belly full, had fallen asleep in his lap. Noah gently stroked her fur, marveling at the strange symmetry of life. "We'll find a way to help all of you," he whispered, both to the sleeping cub and to the unseen forest beyond. "That's my promise." As if in response, from deep within the forest came a low, rumbling call. A mother bear's voice, echoing through the trees. It might have been coincidence or perhaps something more. In Pinewood Village, where the legend of the baby and the bear had shaped an entire community's relationship with the natural world, such mysteries were embraced rather than explained away. Noah smiled, feeling the weight of the sleeping cub against his chest, a tangible reminder that the most profound connections often begin with the simplest acts of compassion. What had once been unthinkable, a child sharing water with a desperate mother bear, had transformed not just a village, but the course of countless lives, human and animal alike. And the story, like the forest itself, continued to grow. 5 years later, the breakthrough. The Pinewood Wildlife Rehabilitation Center had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What had begun as a local initiative had evolved into an internationally recognized research facility, drawing scientists and conservationists from around the world. Dr. Noah Morgan, now 41, had become a leading authority on wildlife behavior and interspecies communication, his revolutionary methods challenging long-held assumptions about animal consciousness. On this particular autumn morning, Noah stood before a gathering of skeptical colleagues in the center's main conference room. The presentation he was about to give would either cement his reputation as a visionary or label him as someone whose childhood experience had led, with the center's staff gathering for an impromptu party in the main hall. It was nearly midnight when Noah finally made his way to Stella's enclosure, a spacious habitat designed to mimic her natural environment while allowing for the specialized communication equipment they'd developed. She was awake, as if she'd been waiting for him, her intelligent eyes following his movements as he approached the viewing area. "We did it, girl," Noah said softly. "They're finally listening." Stella moved to the communication panel and deliberately pressed a sequence. More, danger, coming. Noah felt a chill run through him. "What kind of danger, Stella? Can you show me?" The bear touched the screen again. "Fire. Big. Soon." Noah checked the latest meteorological reports on his tablet. There was no fire warning, no drought conditions that would suggest an imminent wildfire risk. Yet something in Stella's insistence made him uneasy. "I need more information," he told her. "When? Where?" But Stella had moved away from the panel, pacing restlessly in her enclosure, exhibiting signs of agitation they hadn't seen in years. Noah didn't sleep that night. Instead, he reviewed all their communication data, looking for patterns, for anything that might explain Stella's warning. By dawn, he had found nothing conclusive, yet the bear's message haunted him. Fire. Big. Soon. As a precaution, he authorized additional fire monitoring equipment to be deployed throughout the protected forest area and put the center's emergency response team on alert. His colleagues thought he was overreacting, but they humored him. After the success of yesterday's presentation, they were inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. 3 days later, Noah was awakened in the middle of the night by the center's alarm system. Stumbling to his computer, he saw that the remote sensors were detecting a rapid temperature increase in the northern sector of the forest, too rapid to be natural. By the time he reached the center's main operations room, the situation was clear. Someone had deliberately set a fire at multiple points around the perimeter of the protected area, using accelerants to ensure rapid spread. With the unusually dry conditions of the late autumn, the forest was especially vulnerable. "It's deliberate," said Elena, now the center's operations director, her face grim in the glow of the monitoring screens. "The fire breaks are positioned to drive the wildlife straight into the valley, where we're detecting vehicle activity." Noah understood immediately. Poachers. They're using the fire to force the animals into a killing zone. Within hours, the situation had escalated into a crisis. The fire was spreading faster than the regional firefighting teams could contain it, threatening not only the wildlife, but the village of Pinewood itself. Noah coordinated with emergency services, with his staff, with anyone who could help, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. In the midst of the chaos, he made his way to Stella's enclosure. The bear was agitated, moving back and forth in obvious distress. "You knew," Noah said, pressing his palm against the reinforced glass that separated them. "Somehow, you knew this was coming, but how?" On an impulse, Noah did something unprecedented. He ordered Stella's enclosure opened and secured a specialized tracking collar around her neck. "Dr. Morgan, what are you doing?" Elena asked in alarm as Noah led Stella toward the forest edge. The protocols weren't designed for this," Noah replied, his voice firm. "She's been trying to tell us something, and I think she needs to show us, not just communicate through symbols." With emergency teams standing by, Noah released Stella at the forest boundary. The bear paused, looking back at him for just a moment, then lumbered into the trees with surprising speed. Noah followed on an all-terrain vehicle, tracking her signal, maintaining a respectful distance. What happened next would later be described in scientific journals, documentary films, and eventually, history books. Stella led Noah not toward the fire, but away from it, to a section of the forest that seemed unremarkable, until she began to dig at a specific location, uncovering what appeared to be an old concrete structure, partially buried. Noah approached cautiously, shining his flashlight into the opening Stella had created. What he discovered was a long-abandoned underground bunker, a relic from military operations conducted in the area decades before the wildlife preserve was established. Inside were rusty barrels marked with faded hazard symbols. Chemical weapons storage, Noah breathed, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. If the fire reached this location, the old containment could fail, releasing toxins that would devastate the ecosystem for generations. Using the center's emergency communication system, Noah alerted authorities to the imminent threat. Within hours, specialized hazmat teams had arrived, securing the site just as the fire's leading edge approached the area. The discovery triggered a massive, coordinated response. The governor declared a state emergency. Additional firefighting resources were deployed, and evacuation orders were issued for Pinewood and surrounding communities. For 3 days, the battle against the fire continued, with Noah working alongside the emergency teams, coordinating wildlife rescue operations, while specialized units removed the dangerous materials from the bunker. When the flames were finally contained, the forest had suffered significant damage, but the catastrophic chemical disaster had been averted. As the immediate crisis subsided, Noah faced intense questioning from authorities, colleagues, and the media. How had he known about the hidden bunker? How had a bear led him directly to a decades-old environmental threat that wasn't on any modern map? "I don't have all the answers," Noah admitted in a press conference that was broadcast internationally. "But what I do know is that our assumption of superior intelligence, of being the only species capable of complex knowledge transfer, needs to be fundamentally reconsidered." Research teams descending on Pinewood in the aftermath of the fire made another startling discovery. The area surrounding the old bunker showed evidence of bear activity going back generations. Claw marks on trees, worn paths, signs that bears had been monitoring the site long before human authorities had forgotten its existence. "It appears to be cultural knowledge," Noah explained to a stunned scientific committee weeks later. "Information passed from mother to cubs across generations, possibly dating back to the very bear my village encountered during the drought 30 years ago." In the months that followed, as the forest began its slow recovery and the Pinewood Wildlife Rehabilitation Center became the focal point of a new scientific movement, Noah often found himself returning to the stone fountain at the edge of the village. The carved bear at its center had partially melted in the intense heat of the fire, creating an abstract form that somehow seemed more powerful, more alive than the original sculpture. It was here that Noah was sitting when Elena found him, 6 months after the fire, clutching a letter bearing the official seal of the Nobel Committee. "Congratulations," she said, sitting beside him on the scorched stone bench. "First veterinarian to be nominated for the Peace Prize. Your parents would have been so proud." Noah's parents had both passed away the previous year, just months before the fire. A blessing, perhaps, that they hadn't lived to see their beloved village threatened, though Noah wished they could have witnessed the validation of his life's work. "It doesn't feel real," Noah admitted, looking out at the recovering forest. New growth was already pushing through the blackened soil, nature's resilience on full display. "All of this from a moment that I can barely remember. But others remember," Elena said softly. "The story kept alive all these years. It shaped this entire community's relationship with the natural world. And now, it's shaping how the world understands communication between species." In the distance, they could see a group of researchers working with Stella and 2 younger bears, using the expanded communication system Noah had developed. What had begun as a rudimentary interface had evolved into a sophisticated platform, allowing for more complex information exchange. Bears that had been raised in the rehabilitation program were now being carefully reintroduced to the wild, carrying specialized communication devices that allowed them to maintain contact with the center. "Do you ever wonder?" Noah asked, voicing a thought that had occurred to him often since the fire. "If there's something more to it? Something beyond scientific explanation?" Elena, always the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like..." Noah struggled to articulate the feeling that had haunted him since childhood. "Like there's a pattern to it all. The drought that brought the bear to our village, the fire that revealed the hidden danger, the connection that spans generations, both bear and human." Before Elena could respond, Noah's communication device chimed with an alert from the center. Stella was requesting contact, something she did rarely now that she had been successfully reintroduced to the wild. They hurried back to the main facility, where the communication team had already established connection with Stella's wilderness unit. On the large screen, symbols appeared in sequence, translated in real time by the system Noah had designed. New bears, mountains. Need help? Come. Noah studied the geographic data, to whoever or whatever was guiding this extraordinary unfolding. "I'm ready." The mountain expedition, revelations. The preparations for the expedition to the northern mountain range consumed the next 2 weeks. Noah assembled a team unlike any previously formed for wildlife research, not just biologists and trackers, but also child development specialists, linguistic experts, and cultural anthropologists. If they were truly about to encounter a human child living among bears, the approach would need to be handled with unprecedented sensitivity and care. Dr. Meera Patel, the world's leading authority on feral children, the rare documented cases of humans raised outside of human society, had flown in from Mumbai immediately upon receiving Noah's call. "We must proceed with extreme caution," she warned during their final planning session. "If this child has indeed been integrated into bear society, our presence could be profoundly traumatic for the child and potentially for the bears who consider her family." Noah nodded, studying the detailed topographical maps spread across the conference table. "Stella will be our intermediary. She's maintained regular communication, indicating that the bears are aware of our approach and, if I'm interpreting correctly, are cautiously receptive." What Noah didn't share with the team was Eleanor's journal, now a constant companion in his pocket. Each night he discovered that new pages seemed to fill with writing. Impossible, of course, yet the guidance contained within had proven remarkably prescient during their preparations. The most recent entry had been particularly cryptic. "The child is the key, but not in the way you imagine. She is both less and more than you expect. Remember, the water offered without thought of return." As dawn broke on the day of departure, Noah found Stella waiting at the perimeter of the rehabilitation center. An unexpected development, as she had been ranging far to the north in recent weeks. The bear approached the transport vehicles with purpose, making it clear she intended to physically accompany the expedition. "This changes our logistics," Elena said, watching as the team hastily modified one of the transport trucks to safely accommodate a 700-pound brown bear. "But it feels significant." "It is," Noah agreed quietly. "She's not just guiding us, she's vouching for us." The journey to the mountains took 3 days, following remote logging roads that eventually gave way to wilderness trails passable only by specialized vehicles. As they climbed in elevation, the May weather grew increasingly unpredictable. warm sunshine giving way to sudden snow flurries that dusted the emerging spring vegetation. On the morning of the fourth day, they reached the coordinates Stella had indicated, a hidden valley nestled between towering granite peaks. The location matched Eleanor's drawing with uncanny precision, down to the distinctive rock formation that resembled a bear's head overlooking the valley floor. "We establish base camp here," Noah instructed, pointing to a clearing just inside the valley entrance. "Minimum footprint, absolute adherence to low-impact protocols. Nothing enters the ecosystem that can't be completely removed." As the team began setting up the sophisticated monitoring equipment that would allow them to observe without direct intervention, Stella grew increasingly restless. Finally, she approached Noah directly, making the now familiar gestures that indicated she wanted access to the portable communication panel. The symbols she selected were clear. "Noah, come. Alone. Now." "Absolutely not," Elena objected, when Noah explained his intention to follow Stella further into the valley. "We haven't completed the safety surveys. There could be territorial males, unstable terrain." "This is why we're here," Noah said firmly, checking the specialized communication device strapped to his wrist, a compact version of the center's system. "Stella is explicitly asking for me, and only me, to follow. This is her world now. We need to respect her protocols, as she has respected ours." Before additional objections could be raised, Noah shouldered a small pack containing only essential supplies and began following Stella along a narrow game trail that wound deeper into the valley. The bear moved with purposeful efficiency, occasionally looking back to ensure Noah was keeping pace. After nearly an hour of hiking, they reached a rock shelf overlooking a small meadow surrounded by dense forest. Stella stopped, indicating Noah should remain silent and still. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the meadow below, where something extraordinary was unfolding. 5 adult bears, larger and wilder-looking than the rehabilitation center's residents, were gathered in what appeared to be a deliberate formation. At the center of their circle was a small figure that Noah initially mistook for a bear cub, but as his eyes adjusted to the dappled forest light, he realized he was seeing exactly what Stella had communicated: a human child. She appeared to be approximately 10 years old, with tangled dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Her skin was deeply tanned, and she moved with a fluid grace that mimicked the bears around her. Most remarkably, she was engaged in what could only be described as communication, making specific gestures and vocalizations that the bears seemed to understand and respond to. Noah watched, barely breathing, as the child and bears engaged in what appeared to be a complex social interaction. The child would approach each bear in turn, making different sounds and movements, to which the bears responded with their own communication signals. After several minutes of observation, Stella made a soft huffing sound, instantly drawing the attention of every bear in the meadow below. The child looked up sharply, her eyes scanning the ridge until they locked with Noah's. Instead of fear or surprise, her expression showed only intense curiosity. What happened next defied everything Noah thought he understood about bear-human dynamics. The child made a series of gestures to the largest bear, clearly the matriarch of the group, who responded with a deliberate nod. Then, with no hesitation, the child began climbing the rocky slope toward Noah's position, moving with the sure-footed confidence of a creature born to the mountains. When she reached the ledge where Noah and Stella waited, she stopped several yards away, studying Noah with unnerving intensity. Up close, Noah could see that what he had taken for clothing was actually a carefully constructed garment made from plant fibers and what appeared to be shed bear fur, ingeniously woven together. Noah remained perfectly still, allowing the child to observe him while Stella made soft, reassuring sounds. After a long moment, The child turned to Stella and made several gestures, some of which Noah recognized from their communication system, though used in combinations he had never seen. Stella responded with her own gestures, then looked expectantly at Noah. Understanding dawned. Stella was acting as translator. Moving slowly, Noah activated his wrist device and input a simple greeting that would be displayed as symbols. Hello, friend, no harm. The child's reaction was astonishing. Rather than showing confusion at the technology, she approached with confident curiosity, examining the device with evident recognition. Then, to Noah's amazement, she reached out and deliberately selected symbols in response. No, human, different. You understand our communication system, Noah said softly, his voice rough with emotion. The child tilted her head, listening. Then she spoke, not in growls or animalistic sounds, but in halting, accented English. Watch, long time, learn. Noah struggled to control his shock. This wasn't a feral child incapable of human language. This was someone who had been observing humans, learning from a distance, while living integrated with the bear community. What's your name? Noah asked gently. The child made a sound that was unlike any human name, a melodic vocalization that seemed to incorporate elements of bear communication. Then she added, human word. Sarah. Sarah, Noah repeated, feeling a strange sense of recognition, though he was certain they had never met. How long have you been with the bears? Sarah considered this, then held up both hands, fingers splayed. 10 winters, since small. Noah's mind raced with implications. A child who had been living with bears since infancy should not have developed human language skills. Yet, Sarah was not only speaking, but had apparently been secretly observing and learning from humans for years. Your human family, Noah began carefully. Do you remember them? Sarah's expression darkened. Bad memory, fire, mother give to bear mother. She pointed toward the meadow, where the large matriarch bear waited, watching their interaction with evident awareness. New mother save, teach, protect. The pieces began to fall into place in Noah's mind. A forest fire, a desperate human mother making an unthinkable choice to give her child to a bear rather than have them both perish. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence stood before him. The bears accepted you? Noah asked, still struggling to reconcile what he was witnessing with everything science understood about bear behavior. Sarah nodded solemnly. Bear mother lose cubs, have milk, need child. She touched her chest. I need mother. Together. Live. Noah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What Sarah was describing, a lactating bear who had lost her cubs adopting a human infant, was unprecedented in scientific literature but consistent with the extraordinary capacity for cross-species compassion he had witnessed throughout his life. Before he could ask another question, Sarah's attention shifted to his pocket, where Eleanor's journal was visible. With surprising directness, she reached toward it. May see. Wordlessly, Noah handed her the journal. Sarah opened it immediately to the most recent entry, one Noah had not yet seen, and traced her finger along the handwritten text as if reading, though Noah doubted she could understand the written words. Elder woman, Sarah said, looking up at him with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient. She visits, teaches words, shows pictures. She tapped the journal. Many winters. Noah felt the world tilt slightly beneath him. Eleanor visited you? Here? Sarah nodded. First human friend. Says, wait for Bearman. She pointed directly at Noah. You. The implications were staggering. Eleanor, somehow, had known about Sarah for years, had been visiting and teaching her, preparing her for this eventual meeting. It defied logical explanation, yet the evidence was undeniable. As the sun began to set over the mountain valley, Noah made a decision that would later be described as either the most brilliant or most reckless choice of his scientific career. Rather than returning to base camp, he asked Sarah's permission to stay the night, to observe and learn from the bear community that had raised her. What followed was an extraordinary night of revelation. Under Sarah's guidance, Noah was permitted to approach the bear group, not as an outside observer, but as an invited guest. The matriarch bear, whom Sarah called by a name that sounded like a melodic rumble, inspected Noah thoroughly before accepting his presence. Around a small fire that Sarah expertly built, Noah witnessed the complex social dynamics of this unique family unit. The bears arranged themselves in a protective circle around Sarah and, by extension, Noah. Sarah explained, in her mixture of English and bear-like vocalizations, that this particular group had separated from the larger bear population years ago, developing distinct cultural practices that centered around her unique presence among them. "Why did you allow me to find you now?" Noah asked as the fire burned low. "You could have remained hidden." Sarah's young face grew serious beyond her years. "Bears know. Humans destroy forest, need help." She explained, with Stella occasionally adding clarifying gestures, that the isolated mountain population was facing increasing pressure from human encroachment. Logging operations approaching from the west, mining surveys to the north. The bears had adapted for generations by retreating higher into the mountains, but they were running out of places to go. "Bears, smart," Sarah said emphatically. "Not want fight, want talk." She pointed at Noah's communication device. "Like this, tell humans, forest for all." Noah sat in stunned silence, absorbing the extraordinary proposition. What Sarah was suggesting wasn't just cross-species communication as a scientific curiosity. It was actual negotiation between bears and humans over territorial rights and resource sharing. "This is why Stella brought me here," Noah said softly. "Not just to find you, but to establish diplomatic relations." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "Bears choose you. Trust. Remember water." "Water?" Noah asked, confused. "Story of child, bear, drought." Sarah made a gesture of offering. "First trust, bears remember." Noah felt a profound shift in his understanding. "The story of my childhood. The bears know it?" Sarah nodded. "Mother to cub, many generations, important story. Shows possibility." As the fire died to embers and the bears settled around them for the night, Noah found himself experiencing a profound sense of coming full circle. What had begun as a simple act of compassion from a toddler had been preserved in bear cultural memory, just as it had been in human village lore. Two parallel traditions, separated by species but united by recognition of a fundamental truth, that compassion could transcend even the most profound differences. In the morning, Noah returned to the expedition base camp with Sarah and 3 of the bears, including the matriarch, accompanying him. The research team's initial shock quickly gave way to excitement as they realized the unprecedented opportunity before them. Over the weeks that followed, the Pinewood Wildlife Rehabilitation Center established the world's first formal bear-human diplomatic program. Sarah served as the primary interpreter, helping to refine and expand the communication system Noah had developed with Stella. Teams of linguists and animal behaviorists worked to document the sophisticated communication patterns of the mountain bears, discovering levels of complexity that revolutionary previous understanding of animal cognition. Most significantly, Noah initiated formal discussions with government agencies and conservation organizations, presenting evidence that the bears were actively seeking protected status for their mountain territory, not as passive beneficiaries of human conservation efforts, but as conscious stakeholders in their own right. The scientific community's reaction was predictably mixed. Some dismissed the entire program as anthropomorphism taken to an extreme. Others recognized it as the next frontier in understanding non-human intelligence. But as data accumulated and communication protocols became more sophisticated, even the most skeptical observers had to acknowledge that something unprecedented was occurring in the mountains above Pinewood. 6 months after the initial contact, Noah stood before the United Nations Environmental Assembly, with Sarah beside him, making the case for what would become known as the Interspecies Sovereignty Accord, the first legal framework acknowledging the right of non-human species to participate in decisions affecting their habitats. What began 30 years ago with a child offering water to a desperate mother bear has evolved into something none of us could have imagined. Noah told the assembled delegates, not merely coexistence, but communication, not simply conservation, but collaboration. Sarah, now more comfortable in human settings, though she still divided her time between the research center and her bear family, addressed the assembly in her improved but still distinctive English. Bears ask simple thing. Listen. Talk before destroy. Remember, we all share Earth. As the assembly erupted in discussion, some inspired, some skeptical, some openly hostile to the concept, Noah felt Eleanor's journal grow warm in his pocket. Opening it later in the privacy of his hotel room, he found a final entry written in a hand he had come to know well. The circle is complete. What began with water shared between innocent and desperate has grown into a river of possibility flowing between worlds once separate. You will face resistance, for humans fear what challenges their place at the center of all things. But remember, compassion offered without expectation of return is the most powerful force in any world, human or wild. The bears have always known this. Now, perhaps, humanity will remember. The journal's remaining pages were blank, and though Noah kept it close in the years that followed, no new entries ever appeared. He didn't need them anymore. The path forward was clear, challenging and uncertain, but illuminated by the simple truth that had guided his life since that long-ago drought, that the boundaries between species were far more permeable than anyone had imagined, and that communication across those boundaries began not with sophisticated technology, but with recognition of shared needs and the willingness to extend compassion without limits. In time, the Pinewood model of interspecies communication expanded to include other mammals, wolves, elephants, cetaceans, each with their own unique cognitive landscapes and communication needs. What had once been dismissed as fantasy became the foundation of a new scientific discipline, cognitive diplomacy. And it had all begun with the unthinkable. A baby offering water to a desperate mother bear, creating ripples of compassion that would eventually grow into waves powerful enough to reshape humanity's relationship with the natural world. A legacy challenged 10 years later. The sprawling campus of the International Center for Interspecies Communication had transformed the once modest village of Pinewood into a global hub of scientific innovation. On this crisp autumn morning, 51-year-old Dr. Noah Morgan walked thoughtfully along the memorial path that wound through the heart of the facility, nodding to researchers and students who greeted him with reverent respect. The path was lined with carved stone markers commemorating milestones in the revolutionary field he had helped establish. The first formal bear-human treaty, the groundbreaking work with elephant cognitive mapping, the controversial but ultimately successful wolf reintroduction program that had been guided by direct communication with pack leaders. At the center of the memorial garden stood the original stone fountain from the village, now housed within a circular glass pavilion that protected it, while allowing visitors to connect with where everything had begun. Noah paused at the fountain, running his fingers along the worn stone edge. 20 years had passed since the mountain expedition that had introduced the world to Sarah and her bear family, changing forever humanity's understanding of animal cognition. Sarah herself, now a formidable 30-year-old woman with doctoral degrees in both comparative psychology and conservation biology, had become the public face of interspecies diplomacy, traveling the world to establish communication hubs in threatened ecosystems. "I thought I'd find you here," came a familiar voice. Noah turned to see Elena approaching, her once dark hair now streaked with silver, but her practical efficiency unchanged. As the center's executive director, she managed the complex logistics of an organization that had expanded to 15 countries on 6 continents. "The UN delegation arrives tomorrow," she reminded him gently. "The Secretary General specifically requested that you lead the tour." Noah nodded absently. "I haven't forgotten." The visit was significant, the culmination of years of negotiation to establish the first interspecies protected territories, areas where governance would be formally shared between humans and the local keystone species through established communication protocols. What had begun as a radical concept dismissed by most had gradually gained acceptance as the communication technology improved and the economic benefits of collaborative conservation became apparent. "You seem distracted," Elena observed. "Is it the protest movement?" Noah sighed, gesturing toward the tablet he carried. The screen displayed news headlines that had become increasingly common. "Anti-diplomacy protests grow in major cities." "Senator calls for investigation into animal mind control." "Religious leaders question unnatural communication." 20 years of progress, Noah said quietly, and still there are those who see darkness in understanding rather than speaking for other species. The movement against interspecies communication had grown alongside its successes. What had begun as scientific skepticism had evolved into organized opposition, fueled by a mixture of religious objections, economic interests, threatened by new conservation regulations, and deep-seated human insecurity about sharing decision-making power with non-human species. "Dr. Rivera's team has detected increased security threats," Elena said carefully. "His recommendation is that you cancel the public lecture scheduled for next week." Noah shook his head firmly. Retreating into secured facilities only reinforces their narrative that we're conducting something secretive and dangerous. "The lecture stays on the calendar." Before Elena could object further, Noah's communication device chimed with the distinctive tone reserved for urgent messages from the bear territories. Activating the holographic display, he found himself looking at Sarah's concerned face. "Noah, we have a situation developing in the northern range," she said without preamble. 3 young males have been found dead near the mineral extraction boundary. Local rangers are classifying it as territorial conflict, but Grand Matriarch insists it was deliberate poisoning. Grand Matriarch was the honorary title given to the elderly bear who had raised Sarah, now one of the oldest known wild bears, and a revered figure whose communications were taken with the utmost seriousness. "What evidence does she cite?" Noah asked, immediately shifting into crisis management mode. "Unusual scent markers around the water source. Specific behavior patterns before death consistent with neurotoxins rather than physical trauma," Sarah replied efficiently. "Most concerning, she reports human scent trails deliberately masked with chemical agents, professionals, not opportunistic hunters." Noah exchanged a worried glance with Elena. Organized anti-wildlife activity has been increasing in that sector. We've documented 6 incidents in the past month alone. "This feels different," Sarah insisted. "Grand Matriarch says it reminds her of old stories. Humans who came before to test ways of killing many bears at once." Noah felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Chemical weapons testing. The old military bunker. "We thought that threat was contained decades ago," Elena said, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. "The original materials were removed," Noah agreed, "but the knowledge of the location remains. If someone wanted to test new bioweapons against large mammals without drawing international attention." He didn't need to complete the thought. The remote mountain territories, despite their protected status, would provide ideal conditions for clandestine weapons development, particularly if the deaths could be disguised as natural conflicts. "I'm coming up," Noah decided immediately. "Have your team secure the site, but touch nothing. Full hazmat protocols for anyone approaching the water source." "Already implemented," Sarah confirmed. "But Noah, there's something else. Grandma Triarch is insisting you come alone. No research team, no security detail." Elena immediately protested. "Absolutely not. With the current political climate and specific threats against you—" "Did she say why?" Noah interrupted, his attention fixed on Sarah's holographic image. Sarah hesitated. "She says, 'Some truths can only be shown in the way they began. One human, one bear, no witnesses.'" The cryptic message sent a shiver of recognition through Noah. It echoed entries from Eleanor's journal, the impossible journal that had guided him years ago and had remained blank since the establishment of the diplomatic protocols. "I need to honor her request," Noah said quietly. "It could be a trap," Elena insisted. "We have credible intelligence that extremist elements want to discredit the entire program. What better way than to eliminate its founder?" Noah considered this, then reached into his pocket and withdrew Eleanor's worn leather journal, still his constant companion after all these years. "I need to show you something," he said, opening it to reveal what Elena had never seen. Fresh writing on previously blank pages. Elena stared in disbelief at the entry dated that very morning. "The circle must close where it began. The greatest threat is not to your life, but to your life's work. Trust in what has guided you from the beginning." "How is this possible?" Elena whispered, touching the page as if to verify it was real. "I stopped asking that question long ago," Noah admitted, "but I've learned to trust it. I'm going alone." Preparations for Noah's journey to the northern range were completed with reluctant efficiency. By nightfall, he was aboard a small, unmarked aircraft, carrying minimal equipment, only his communication device, basic survival gear, and Eleanor's journal. The flight took him deep into the protected territories, beyond the established research outposts to a remote landing strip rarely used except in emergencies. Sarah was waiting alone when he landed, her tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. "The situation has escalated," she informed him as they transferred to an all-terrain vehicle. "2 more bears found dead this afternoon. Grand Matriarch has moved the entire clan to the High Valley." As they drove through the gathering darkness, Sarah filled Noah in on the political complexities that had been developing within Bear Society. Factions forming around different approaches to human relations, younger bears questioning the wisdom of cooperation, elders insisting on maintaining the diplomatic approach. The deaths had inflamed tensions, with some bears calling for withdrawal from all human contact. "The timing couldn't be worse," Noah observed grimly. "With the UN vote next month and the opposition growing more organized." Sarah nodded, her face grave in the dashboard light. "Grand Matriarch says it's not coincidence. She believes someone is deliberately provoking a crisis." They reached the base of a steep trail as night fully descended. From here, they would continue on foot. As they gathered their equipment, Sarah suddenly placed a restraining hand on Noah's arm. "Listen," she whispered. Through the mountain darkness came a low, melodic huffing sound. A bear vocalization Noah had learned to recognize as a formal greeting. But there was something different about this one. Something that triggered a memory so distant it felt more like dream than recollection. "That sound," he began. "Grand Matriarch's personal call," Sarah confirmed. "But she's using an ancient variation. She's calling you by your bear name." "My bear name?" Sarah's eyes reflected the moonlight as she looked at him with surprise. "You don't know? Since the day you gave water as a child, you've carried a name in bear society. All these years I assumed you knew." Before Noah could process this revelation, a massive shape emerged from the shadows ahead, Grand Matriarch, moving with the deliberate dignity of extreme age. Despite her advanced years, she remained imposing, her silver-flecked fur catching the moonlight as she approached. Sarah immediately made the formal gestures of greeting and respect, but the elderly bear's attention was fixed solely on Noah. She approached until she stood directly before him, then rose slightly on her hind legs to bring her face level with his, a position of tremendous vulnerability for a bear, exposing the throat and chest. "She's initiating the recognition," Sarah whispered, awe evident in her voice. "It's extremely rare, even between bears. I've never seen it offered to a human." Noah stood perfectly still as Grand Matriarch lowered herself back to all fours, then deliberately pressed her forehead against his chest, directly over his heart. The gesture lasted only seconds, but Noah felt something profound pass between them, a communication more direct than any technology could facilitate. When Grand Matriarch stepped back, she made a series of vocalizations and gestures that caused Sarah to gasp. "What is it?" Noah asked, sensing the gravity of the moment. "She says..." Sarah hesitated, struggling to translate concepts that existed at the edge of human understanding. "She says the poisoning of her family is merely the surface of a deeper poison, one that threatens to undo the trust built over generations. She says you must see what she has discovered, but warns that the knowledge carries great danger." Grand Matriarch turned and began moving up the mountain trail with surprising speed for her age. Noah and Sarah followed, climbing steadily through the darkness. After nearly an hour, they reached a high meadow bathed in moonlight. At its center was a sight that stopped Noah in his tracks. A perfect circle of bears, 20 or more, arranged in what could only be described as a ceremonial formation. As Grand Matriarch led them toward the circle, the bears parted to reveal what they had been surrounding, a small, crystal-clear pool fed by a mountain spring. Beside the pool lay the bodies of the 5 dead bears, carefully arranged with evident reverence. "This is their sacred water," Sarah explained softly. "Used only for the most important ceremonies. The fact that they've brought the dead here..." Grand Matriarch approached the pool and made a sweeping gesture that clearly requested Noah examine the water. With careful movements, he removed specialized testing equipment from his pack, portable sensors designed to detect biological and chemical contaminants. As the analysis ran, Noah became aware of an unusual silence. Not just quiet, but a complete absence of sound, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Even the slight breeze had died away, leaving the meadow in perfect stillness. The testing device chimed, indicating the analysis was complete. Noah stared at the results, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "This is impossible," he murmured. Sarah moved to his side, studying the display. "What is it?" "The water contains traces of a synthetic compound I've never seen documented. A neurological agent specifically designed to target the cognitive centers we've identified as crucial to interspecies communication." Noah looked up, meeting Sarah's alarmed gaze. "This isn't just poison. It's a precision weapon designed to destroy the bear's ability to communicate with humans while leaving them otherwise unharmed. Who would create such a thing? Sarah asked, but her expression showed she already suspected the answer. Someone who wants to end interspecies diplomacy without the negative publicity of mass wildlife killings, Noah said grimly. Someone who understands enough about our research to target exactly the neural pathways we've mapped. An insider, Sarah concluded. Someone from the center. The implications were staggering. For 20 years, the International Center had operated on principles of transparency and shared discovery. The thought that someone within their scientific community could betray those ideals so fundamentally was almost incomprehensible. Grand Matriarch approached again, making deliberate gestures toward the eastern horizon, where the faintest lightning indicated approaching dawn. She vocalized a series of low sounds that Sarah translated with growing concern. She says, "We have very little time. The poison is not just here. It's being prepared for distribution throughout all bear territories, timed to coincide with the UN vote. If successful, bears worldwide will lose the ability to communicate just as humanity is deciding whether to formalize their diplomatic status." Noah's mind raced through the implications. It would be interpreted as the bears withdrawing, rejecting the diplomatic framework. The opposition would claim it as evidence that the entire communication program was a human construction projected onto animal behavior. "Everything you've built would collapse," Sarah said softly. "Decades of progress undone in days." Grand Matriarch made another sound, sharper, more insistent, and gestured toward Eleanor's journal, visible in Noah's pocket. With a strange sense of inevitability, Noah withdrew it and opened it to find new text flowing across a previously blank page. "What began with water must end with water. The poison and the cure flow from the same source. Remember that the most powerful force is not intelligence but compassion, and compassion requires no words." As Noah read these words aloud, Grand Matriarch moved to the edge of the sacred pool and made a gesture that needed no translation, the unmistakable motion of offering, of giving without expectation of return. Then she turned her gaze directly to Noah, her ancient eyes holding wisdom that transcended species. In that moment of connection, Noah understood what was being asked of him. With deliberate movements, he removed his communication device, the technology that had revolutionized human-animal relations, and placed it on the ground. Then he approached the pool and knelt beside it, dipping his hands into the water as he had once done as a toddler with a wooden bowl. "Noah, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "The water is contaminated." "Not all of it," Noah said with calm certainty. "Look closely." Sarah joined him at the edge of the pool, and in the strengthening dawn light, she saw what Noah had noticed. A subtle differentiation in the water. A spiraling pattern where pure spring water was pushing against the contamination, creating a natural boundary. With cupped hands, Noah gathered water from the untainted spiral and turned toward Grand Matriarch. Without technology, without sophisticated translation, he recreated the simple act of offering that had started everything, extending water to a bear in need. Grand Matriarch approached and delicately drank from Noah's hands. The circle of bears watched in perfect stillness as this ancient ceremony of trust unfolded, a reminder that beneath all the scientific advances and diplomatic protocols lay a fundamental truth about connection that required no translation. When Grand Matriarch had finished drinking, she made a sound unlike any Noah had heard before, a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the mountain itself. One by one, the other bears added their voices, creating a harmonious chorus that rose toward the brightening sky. "What are they doing?" Noah asked, awed by the power of the sound surrounding them. Sarah listened intently, her expression transforming from confusion to wonder. "It's the calling song. I've only heard stories about it. They're summoning bears from all territories to witness what has happened and what must be done." Throughout that day, bears arrived in the high meadow from across the protected territories. More bears than Noah had ever seen gathered in one place, representing multiple clans that normally maintained careful boundaries. By nightfall, over 100 bears surrounded the sacred pool, creating a living barrier of fur and muscle and resolve. As darkness fell, Grand Matriarch initiated a ceremony unlike anything previously documented in scientific literature. A complex exchange of sounds, movements, and physical contacts that Sarah struggled to translate, even with her lifetime of experience. "They're establishing a new covenant," she explained to Noah as they watched from the edge of the gathering. "Not just with us, but with each other. They're vowing to protect the sacred pools in every territory and to teach the recognition to all cubs born hereafter." The recognition? What Grand Matriarch shared with you earlier, the forehead-to-heart connection. It's the most direct form of bear communication, one they believe transcends deception. Sarah's voice held wonder. "She's instructing them to share it with trusted humans as a safeguard against future attempts to sever communication." Throughout the night, the ceremony continued, bears moving in patterns that seemed to Noah both ancient and improvised, a cultural response to an unprecedented threat. By morning, the gathering began to disperse, bears returning to their territories carrying new knowledge and purpose. Grand Matriarch approached Noah one final time as the dawn light bathed the meadow. With deliberate movements, she removed a single claw, one already loosened with age but still a precious part of her, and placed it in Noah's hand, closing his fingers around it. "She says it will guide you to the source of the poison," Sarah translated, her voice catching with emotion, "and that when you find it, you will face a choice between justice and reconciliation." Noah closed his fingers around the claw, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. "Tell her I understand." As they prepared to descend the mountain, Noah retrieved his communication device, finding it unexpectedly transformed. The screen displayed an unfamiliar pattern, a spiraling symbol that matched the natural boundary in the sacred pool. "Ah, it's been reprogrammed," he realized, studying the altered interface. "But how?" Sarah examined it with surprise. The bears have no way to interact with digital technology. Yet, somehow, the device had been changed. When Noah activated it, he discovered that all standard functions remained operational, but a new capability had been added, one that seemed to operate on principles that defied current scientific understanding. "It's detecting something beyond the established communication patterns," Noah observed as they made their way down the mountain trail. "Almost like intent, the emotional state behind the communication." What had begun as a mission to investigate mysterious deaths had transformed into something far more significant: the discovery of both an existential threat to interspecies diplomacy and a potential quantum leap in understanding how communication truly functioned across species boundaries. Upon returning to the center, Noah assembled a small team of his most trusted colleagues, excluding any recent additions to the staff, given the likelihood of internal sabotage. Working in a secured laboratory with no external connections, they analyzed both the water samples from the sacred pool and the altered communication device. "The contamination is definitely synthetic," confirmed Dr. Aisha Okafor, the center's leading neurochemist. "A designer molecule targeting specific neural pathways associated with complex communication. Whoever created this has intimate knowledge of our research." "And the delivery system?" Noah asked. Dr. Luis Vega, the environmental systems specialist, pointed to a detailed topographical map of the protected territories. The mountain watersheds are the key. Introduce the agent at these 7 points, and it would reach approximately 98% of the bear population within 14 days. Just in time for the UN vote, Elena noted grimly. Noah studied the spiral pattern now permanently displayed on his communication device. And what about this? Any theories? The scientists exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was Dr. Okafor who finally spoke. The alterations to the device's programming don't align with any known technological framework. We can observe the effects, but the underlying mechanisms are, let's just say they challenge our current understanding of both technology and cognition. You're saying it's unexplainable, Noah pressed. I'm saying it appears to operate on principles we haven't yet discovered, Dr. Okafor corrected carefully. The bears may have access to knowledge about communication that transcends our technological approach. As the team continued their analysis, Noah withdrew to his private office, removing Eleanor's journal from his pocket. The leather felt unusually warm to the touch as he opened it to find a new entry. The betrayer sits at your table, breaks your bread, and speaks your words with practiced precision. They believe they act from reason while blind to the fear that truly drives them. When you discover their identity, remember that the greatest acts of healing often follow the deepest wounds of betrayal. Noah closed the journal, troubled by the cryptic warning. The inner circle of the center included people he had worked with for decades, friends, colleagues, companions in building a dream of interspecies cooperation. The thought that one of them could be orchestrating such elaborate sabotage was painful beyond measure. Yet the evidence was mounting. The sophisticated nature of the neural toxin, the strategic timing, the intimate knowledge of bear territories, and center research all pointed to someone with privileged access and advanced scientific understanding. The investigation proceeded with painstaking discretion. Noah established a secure communication channel with Sarah, who had remained in the mountains to coordinate protection of the sacred pools. Each day brought new discoveries, additional contamination sites, evidence of systematic planning spanning at least 3 years, sophisticated measures to conceal the operation from the center's monitoring systems. 2 days before the scheduled UN delegation visit, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Michael Chen, the center's junior archivist, requested an urgent meeting with Noah. I've been reviewing the archived communication logs as you requested, Doctor. Chen explained, his young face grave beyond his years. Looking for anomalies in access patterns, I found something concerning in the deep backup files. He displayed a complex data visualization showing access to the center's most sensitive research, the neural mapping studies that had identified the specific pathways targeted by the mystery toxin. See this pattern? Dr. Chen highlighted a recurring signature. Someone has been systematically accessing these files during system maintenance periods, using administrative credentials to avoid the standard logging procedures. Noah studied the pattern, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Whose credentials? Dr. Chen hesitated. That's what's unusual. They belong to Dr. Elena Vasquez. Noah sat back, momentarily stunned. Elena, his most trusted colleague, his partner in building the center from its humble beginnings, the person who had stood beside him through every challenge and triumph of the past 30 years. There must be some mistake, he said automatically. Elena would never. I thought the same, Doctor. Chen interrupted gently, which is why I did a deeper analysis. The access occurred during periods when Dr. Vasquez was documented to be elsewhere, giving presentations, attending conferences, even during her mother's funeral 3 years ago. Someone using her credentials, Noah concluded, relief flooding through him. Yes, but not by hacking them. The system logs show the credentials were used with her personal authentication devices, someone with physical access to her security tokens and knowledge of her verification protocols. The implication hung in the air between them. Only someone extraordinarily close to Elena could have accomplished such consistent access without detection. Noah dismissed the young archivist with thanks and instructions to share the findings with no one else. Alone in his office, he opened Eleanor's journal once more. The deepest betrayals spring not from malice, but from love distorted by fear. Remember the water, freely given, freely received, and understand that sometimes the greatest acts of compassion require allowing others to face the consequences of their actions. The UN delegation arrived the following morning. Diplomats, scientists, and policymakers from around the world gathered to witness the culmination of decades of work in interspecies communication. Noah greeted them with practiced warmth while his mind raced with implications of what he had discovered. The tour proceeded according to plan, moving through the center's most impressive research facilities, demonstrating the sophisticated communication systems that had revolutionized humanity's relationship with the natural world. Throughout the day, Noah watched Elena, efficient as always, guiding the delegation with practiced expertise, answering questions with the deep knowledge that came from 3 decades at the heart of the program. Nothing in her manner suggested anything amiss, yet the evidence had become impossible to ignore. As the day's formal activities concluded and the delegates retired to their accommodations, Noah asked Elena to join him for a private conversation in the memorial garden. They sat together on a bench beside the original stone fountain, the autumn air crisp around them. 30 years, Noah said quietly. We've built something remarkable together. Elena smiled, though a flicker of something, concern perhaps, crossed her features. From a village legend to international policy, not bad for a boy who once gave water to a bear. I've been thinking a lot about that story lately, Noah continued, studying her face carefully, about how simple acts can create ripples that grow beyond anything we could imagine. You're feeling nostalgic, Elena observed. It's understandable, with the vote so close. Everything we've worked for is about to be formalized into international law. Noah nodded slowly. Or destroyed in an instant. If, for example, the bears suddenly lost their ability to communicate just as the world was deciding whether to recognize their diplomatic status. Elena's expression didn't change, but Noah saw her hands tighten slightly in her lap. A hypothetical risk we've always acknowledged, which is why the security protocols are so stringent. Indeed, Noah agreed, though no security system is perfect, particularly against an inside threat. Now her eyes met his directly, a challenge in their depths. Are you suggesting something specific, Noah? He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small vial containing water from the sacred pool. We found the contamination, Elena, and traced it back to its source. For a long moment, silence hung between them, a silence filled with 30 years of shared history, of trust built and now teetering on the edge of collapse. When Elena finally spoke, her voice held a complex mixture of defiance and sorrow. You don't understand what you've done. She looked away toward the forest that surrounded the center. What you've unleashed. Help me understand, Noah said quietly. Elena's composure cracked, just slightly. I was protecting you, protecting all of us. You think you're creating something beautiful, but you can't see the danger. What danger, Elena? We're giving them equality. The words burst from her with unexpected force. Not just bears, but wolves, elephants, whales, species with grudges against humanity that span centuries. You think they'll forgive what we've done to them? When they gain full legal standing, what's to stop them from demanding reparations, from reclaiming territories, from restricting human expansion? Noah studied his oldest friend, seeing her fear laid bare. Is that what this is about? You're afraid of a world where humans aren't the only species with a voice in decision-making. I'm afraid of the collapse of human civilization, Elena countered, her voice steadying as she expounded a clearly long-held belief. History shows what happens when powerful new groups gain legal equality: periods of conflict, instability, redistribution of resources. Now imagine that multiplied across species barriers. So, you developed a toxin to selectively disable their ability to communicate with us, Noah said, while leaving them otherwise unharmed, your version of a humane solution. Elena's eyes flashed. It's a safeguard, not a weapon. A way to maintain balance if things go too far. I never intended to deploy it widely unless absolutely necessary. Yet, 5 bears are dead. An unexpected reaction in a small subset of the population, she dismissed. The formula has been refined since then. Noah felt a profound sadness settle over him. Who else is involved, Elena? No one who matters, she said dismissively. Technicians, a few field operators. The vision is mine alone. A vision of maintaining human supremacy, no matter the cost. Elena leaned forward intently. A vision of preserving what we've built as a species. Noah, be reasonable. These communication protocols you've developed, they're revolutionizing human society in positive ways. Medical breakthroughs, technological innovations, cultural enrichment. But there need to be boundaries, safeguards. And you appointed yourself the arbiter of those boundaries, Noah said quietly, without consultation, without consensus. Because you wouldn't listen. Frustration colored her voice. I've tried for years to discuss contingency plans, ethical firewalls, governance structures that maintain ultimate human authority. You dismiss every concern as fear-based resistance to progress. Noah considered her words, recognizing the grain of truth within them. Had he been so focused on advancing interspecies communication that he'd failed to address legitimate concerns about its implications? Had his dismissal of Elena's caution pushed her toward this desperate measure? What were you planning for tomorrow? He asked finally. Elena hesitated, then straightened her shoulders with something like pride. A demonstration of the necessity for caution. During the delegation's visit to the bear territories, the 3 senior bears would exhibit communication difficulties. Temporary, reversible, but unmistakable. It would create just enough doubt about the reliability of interspecies communication to ensure the UN framework included human oversight provisions. A controlled crisis to serve your agenda, Noah summarized. To serve humanity's long-term interests, Elena corrected firmly. Noah stood, looking down at this woman who had walked beside him for 30 years. His colleague, his friend, now revealed as his greatest obstacle. I won't allow it. You can't stop it, Elena replied, a note of genuine regret in her voice. The deployment system is already in place. By dawn, the targeted bears will show symptoms. By the time the delegation arrives, they'll be unable to engage in complex communication. The effects will wear off in approximately 72 hours, by which time the UN framework will include the safeguards I've advocated for years. And if I expose what you've done? Elena's smile held no humor. With what evidence? Water samples from a sacred pool no one but you and Sarah have visited? A mysteriously altered communication device that defies scientific explanation? Against the word of the center's respected executive director? She shook her head. You'd be dismissed as having finally crossed the line from visionary to fanatic. Noah felt the weight of Eleanor's journal in his pocket, the impossible guide that had never failed him. There's always another way, Elena. That's what I've learned in 30 years of talking with bears. As darkness settled over the memorial garden, Noah made no move to detain Elena as she rose to leave. Her parting words hung in the air between them. I genuinely hope you're right about them, Noah. For all our sakes. Alone by the fountain, Noah withdrew Eleanor's journal and found a final entry forming on the page. Water freely given created the first bridge between worlds. Now, water freely restored will determine whether that bridge stands or falls. Trust in what you have always known, that the capacity for compassion exists in all beings, and that recognizing it in others awakens it within ourselves. The choice between worlds has never been yours alone to make. Noah sat in contemplation as stars appeared above the garden. Then, with sudden clarity, he activated his communication device, the one mysteriously altered by bear interaction, and sent a message to Sarah in the mountains. Bring Grand Matriarch and the others. Not to the center, but to the village fountain. Dawn tomorrow. Throughout the night, Noah made preparations. Not to expose Elena's plot or to counter her toxin with some technological solution, but to create something simpler and more profound. A demonstration of the very connection she feared. By first light, he had gathered what he needed and made his way to the original village of Pinewood, where the stone fountain still stood in the village square, now preserved as a historical monument. As the sun rose, the UN delegates arrived, having received Noah's unexpected invitation to begin their tour at this humble location rather than the impressive center facilities. They milled about in confusion, distinguished diplomats and scientists looking out of place in the simple village setting. Dr. Morgan, the Secretary General, approached him with concern. Is everything all right? This deviation from the itinerary is most unusual. A last-minute adjustment, Noah explained smoothly. I realized we've been showing you the technology of interspecies communication without adequately demonstrating its foundation. Elena arrived moments later, her face tight with controlled alarm as she took in the scene. Noah, what are you doing? The delegates are expected at the North Range facility within the hour. A slight change of plans, Noah replied calmly. I thought it important for our guests to understand where everything began. Before Elena could object further, movement at the village edge drew everyone's attention. Emerging from the morning mist came a procession unlike anything the diplomats had ever witnessed. Bears, walking deliberately into the human settlement, led by a massive, silver-tinged matriarch whose age and dignity were evident in every movement. Gasps and murmurs spread through the assembled officials. Security personnel moved protectively toward the delegates, but Noah raised a hand in reassurance. They are invited guests, he said clearly, and they have come to demonstrate something essential about the decision you are preparing to make. Grand Matriarch approached the village fountain, followed by 7 bears of various ages. With deliberate movements, she positioned herself beside the ancient stone structure where, 30 years earlier, a desperate mother bear had received water from an innocent child. Noah stepped forward, filling a simple wooden bowl with water from the fountain, a recreation of that original encounter. But instead of offering it to Grand Matriarch, he turned toward Elena. You believe they cannot forgive, he said quietly. That acknowledging them as equals means inviting retribution for humanity's centuries of domination and destruction. Elena stood rigid, aware of the diplomatic delegation watching with intense interest, caught between maintaining her public role and addressing the crisis Noah had created. "This is neither the time nor place for philosophical debate," she said tightly. "On the contrary," Noah responded. "This is exactly the place and precisely the time." He turned to the delegates. "Within our research facilities, you would have seen sophisticated communication technology, processed data, and controlled demonstrations. All important, all part of the scientific foundations of interspecies diplomacy. But those tools emerged from something more fundamental, the capacity for compassion that transcends species boundaries." With these words, Noah walked to Grand Matriarch and knelt before her, placing the wooden bowl at her feet. "These bears know what has been done," he said clearly. "They know that someone has attempted to silence them, to maintain human dominance by eliminating their ability to speak on equal terms." Elena's face paled as murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. Grand Matriarch studied the bowl at her feet, then raised her gaze to Elena with an intensity that seemed to pierce through all pretense. "They know," Noah continued, his voice carrying across the village square. "Yet they have not chosen retaliation. Instead, they have come to demonstrate something far more powerful." Grand Matriarch moved forward and, to everyone's astonishment, performed the recognition gesture toward Elena, pressing her forehead briefly against the woman's heart. Elena stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief as the massive bear stepped back. "What just happened?" the Secretary General asked, her voice hushed with wonder. "The most sacred form of bear communication," Noah explained. "One that cannot be falsified or manipulated. She has offered recognition to the very person who sought to silence her kind." Sarah stepped forward, her unique position as bridge between species lending weight to her words. "In bear culture, this gesture means, I see your fear. I acknowledge your concern. I offer connection despite our differences." Elena's composure finally broke. "How can they know it was me? How can they offer forgiveness?" Noah gestured toward his altered communication device. The sacred pool showed them not just what was done, but why. "They understand fear, Elena. They've lived with the consequences of human fear for centuries. But they've chosen a different response." Grand Matriarch made a series of vocalizations that Sarah translated for the delegates. "We remember all that humans have done to bears. The killing, the taking of lands, the destruction of our food. We remember, but we choose not to be defined by these memories. The alternative to connection is isolation. Isolation leads to fear. Fear leads to destruction. This cycle has no end unless chosen." The delegates watched in stunned silence as Grand Matriarch picked up the wooden bowl in her massive jaws with delicate precision and offered it to Elena. The message was unmistakable even without translation. With trembling hands, Elena accepted the bowl. "I don't understand. I tried to silence you." Noah spoke softly. "They're offering you water, Elena, as freely as it was once offered to them. Not because you deserve it, but because that's how bridges are built between worlds." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as the full weight of the moment settled upon her. "The deployment system," she said suddenly. "It's still active. Set to release the compound when the bears at North Range are presented to the delegation. Then deactivate it," Noah urged. "There's still time." Elena nodded, pulling out her secure tablet. "I need access to the center's main environmental controls." As Elena worked frantically to halt the automated release of the toxin, Noah addressed the delegation. "Distinguished representatives, you came here expecting to evaluate a scientific breakthrough. Instead, you are witnessing something far more significant, a moral choice being made across species boundaries. The technology of interspecies communication is remarkable, but it is merely a tool. The true foundation of the relationship we propose is the recognition that compassion, forgiveness, and the capacity for growth exist on both sides of the divide. The Secretary General stepped forward, her face solemn. Dr. Morgan, what we've witnessed here will fundamentally alter the framework of the proposed accord, not weakening it, as some might have intended, but strengthening its moral foundation. Elena looked up from her tablet, her face showing both relief and exhaustion. It's done. The system is deactivated and the compounds neutralized. As the morning sun rose higher over the village, casting golden light across the ancient fountain, Noah felt a profound sense of completion. The circle that had begun with a toddler's innocent act of compassion had expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. Not just bridging species, but revealing a path toward healing the deep wounds of history. In the days that followed, Elena's actions were not hidden or excused, but acknowledged openly as part of the complex journey toward a new relationship between species. Rather than facing criminal charges, she was appointed to lead a newly established ethics council composed of both human and animal representatives, tasked with addressing the legitimate concerns about power imbalances in interspecies relations. The UN Interspecies Sovereignty Accord was signed 1 month later, recognizing for the first time in human history the right of non-human species to participate in decisions affecting their habitats and futures. The signing ceremony, held in the mountain meadow beside the sacred pool, was attended by representatives from government, science, religion, and industry, and by bears, wolves, elephants, and cetaceans, each communicating through the systems that had grown from Noah's lifetime of work. As autumn gave way to winter, Noah found himself once again sitting by the village fountain, Eleanor's journal open in his hands. For weeks after the confrontation with Elena, its pages had remained blank. Now, as snowflakes began to fall gently around him, words appeared one final time. The story that began with water offered by innocence to desperation has completed its circle, but endings are merely transitions to new beginnings. Your task in this lifetime is fulfilled, but the ripples you have created will continue long after you are gone. Some will build upon your foundation with wisdom and reverence. Others will challenge and transform it in ways you cannot imagine. This is as it should be. The greatest gift is not in controlling the future, but in planting seeds that others may tend. Noah closed the journal, feeling a profound sense of peace. As he did, he noticed a small figure approaching through the falling snow. A child of perhaps 4 years old, bundled against the cold, eyes bright with curiosity. "Are you the bear man?" the child asked without preamble. Noah smiled. "Some people call me that. Who are you?" "I'm Maya," the child declared. "My grandmother told me you talk to bears." "That's partly true," Noah said, "but the more important part is that I listen to them." Maya considered this with serious concentration. "Can you teach me?" Behind her, an apologetic parent hurried through the snow. "Maya, don't bother Dr. Morgan." "It's no bother," Noah assured them. "In fact, it's perfect timing. I've been considering how to structure the center's new youth education program." As he spoke with Maya's parent about the possibility of the child joining the first cohort of students in interspecies communication, Noah felt the weight of Eleanor's journal in his pocket. No longer a mysterious guide, but a completed testament to an extraordinary journey. That night, Noah dreamed of the mountain meadow and the sacred pool. In the dream, he saw not just the bears he had known, but a vast assembly of creatures, some familiar, others strange, some perhaps not yet born, all gathered in a circle that expanded beyond his sight. At the center stood a simple wooden bowl filled with water, reflecting stars more numerous than he could count. He understood, in the way of dreams, that he was seeing not just the past or present, but a possible future, one where the boundaries between species had not been erased but transcended, where differences were not feared but celebrated as essential parts of a greater whole. When he woke, snow was falling heavily outside his window. Noah rose and went to his desk, where Eleanor's journal lay. Opening it, he found all pages now blank except for the very last, which held a single sentence. "The water you offered returns to you 1,000-fold." Noah Morgan lived 30 more years, long enough to see the world transformed by what had begun in his childhood. He witnessed forests regrow, species return from the brink of extinction, and human communities flourish in new relationships with the natural world. He saw conflicts and setbacks, periods of doubt and resistance, but also breakthroughs that surpassed even his most optimistic hopes. On the day of his 81st birthday, Noah returned once more to the mountain meadow and the sacred pool. He was physically frail now, requiring assistance to make the journey, but his mind remained clear and his purpose unwavering. Waiting for him, as if by ancient appointment, was Grandma Triarch's great-granddaughter, now herself an elder of the bear community, her fur showing the silver tinge of advanced age. Beside her stood Sarah's daughter, who had continued her mother's work as interpreter and advocate. Together, they performed a ceremony that merged human and bear traditions, acknowledging the past, celebrating the present, and setting intentions for a future none of them would see, but all had helped to shape. As the ceremony concluded, Noah approached the sacred pool one final time. The water reflected the setting sun, turning golden, then crimson as day surrendered to evening. With hands no longer strong but still gentle, he filled a wooden bowl, carved from the same design as the one from his childhood, and offered it to the circle of bears and humans that surrounded him. "From water to water," he said simply, "from compassion to connection. From one generation to the next, may the circle remain unbroken." Later that night, as stars appeared above the mountain valley, Noah Morgan closed his eyes for the final time, his life's work complete. The journal that had guided him throughout his extraordinary journey lay open beside him, its pages now filled from beginning to end with the story of a world transformed by the simplest and most profound of gestures, a child offering water to a desperate mother bear. In the morning, they found the journal empty of words but transformed. Its pages had become transparent, like the purest water, reflecting not just the face of whoever looked upon it, but something deeper, the interconnection of all living things, visible to those who had learned how to see. The journal was placed in the center's memorial garden, beside the original stone fountain, where it remains to this day. A wordless testament to the truth that the greatest revolutions begin not with declarations or technologies, but with acts of compassion that recognize no boundaries between hearts. And in forests throughout the world, bears still tell their cubs the story of the water freely given, teaching them to recognize the capacity for connection that exists in all beings. The bridge between worlds that begins with a single act of kindness, freely offered, gratefully received, endlessly echoing through time.